Hello students, welcome back to our series of SAC lectures brought to you by futurefinder.in and collegeboard.tech. Today we're going to take up probably the most important part of our agreement, which is the verb tense or the verb tenses. Now let's start with the verb tenses. So what are verb tenses? Verb tenses are nothing but they are subdivisions of the common time. So if you look at time, obviously you can go through the origin of the word tense, but then that is not what we are looking at. So when we look at time, basically every action can be defined in three times, right? So there are three times: one, which is the past; two, which is the present; and three, which is the future. Right? This is common sense. But sometimes there are some sentences that cannot be explicitly be understood as either the past, present, or future. As for example, an action has just happened, right? As for example, I have just eaten a mango, right? Something of that sort. Now, where does this action fall in terms of time? You might say that because I've done it right now, it is in the present. It could be in the present. Yes, it is in the present, but the action of eating a mango has already finished, right? So that makes it in the past. So there's a confusion that either this is in the present, right, because it has happened just now, or it is in the past because the action has already been done. For us to understand this action, only a time which is either present or past is not sufficient. There has to be a subdivision of these times as well, and in the common terminology we call that the tense. There are four tenses in which the English language has been divided. One is the simple tense, two is the continuous tense, three is the perfect tense, and four, it is the perfect continuous tense. Obviously there is no sequence to it, but then in common usage we would use it as these four tenses in the English language. And obviously these four tenses exist in all the three times: past, present, and future. So there is a combination of simple past tense, there is a combination of simple present tense, and there is a combination of simple future tense. Then there is the past continuous tense, present continuous tense, and the future continuous tense. Similarly, the past perfect tense, the present perfect tense, and the future perfect tense, and the past perfect continuous tense, the past perfect present tense, and the past perfect future tense. So that makes it a total of 3 times into 4 tenses or 12 combinations. This is just a table which highlights how we write verbs in all these 4 tenses, right? In the past we write it as dance, right? Continuous is was dancing, perfect is had danced, and perfect continuous is had been dancing. There is a rule to this madness, right? There is a method to this madness. Now we are going to take out or understand all the methods that govern the verbs in these 4 tenses. So let's start with the simple tense. The simple tense, right? Let's first focus on the simple present tense. Okay? The simple present tense, the use of the simple present tense, actions that happen regularly without the mention of an exact time or general activities. Activities that don't have a specific time or are habitual in nature. As for example, the sun, it always comes out of somewhere and it sets somewhere, right? I'm not specifically using that in a sentence because I want you to understand how the simple present tense works, right? Obviously, this is just school level grammar. This has not got any direct application on the SAT, but actually applied grammar is equal to SAT, right? Okay, so actions that happen generally, regularly, without the mention of a time, which happen habitually, continuously, are all presented in the simple present tense. The simple present tense. And the form is that we use the root form of the verb. So if the verb is, say, run, we just use run, right? We don't use any, say, present participle, we don't use running, or we don't use anything else, right? Like the past tense, which is ran. We don't use anything else with the simple present tense. We use the root form, except there is an exception wherein there is a third person singular where s or es is added. So this is very simple. I don't think that this requires any specialized knowledge. So I run, right? Second person, you run, and third person, he runs, right? So the sun rises in the east and things like that. Whenever there is a third person singular, you add an s, right? Even if it is a third person plural, like they, right? Still no s, it's they run, right? So the only exception out here is the third person singular where s or es is added. I create my writing schedule every week. I create. Okay, so it is something that happens regularly, generally. And there are some examples, as for example, she creates, which is again a third person singular, and they create, right? Again, you can see that they, once it becomes a plural, it no longer s is required. So s is not required. Okay. When it comes to the past tense, these are actions that used to happen regularly in the past. As for example, I wore black shoes to school, right? So the verb in this case is in the past tense. Now, as we have already mentioned when we did when we actually saw the chapter on or video on verbs, that a verb has got three forms, right? One, the root, then there is the past participle, and then there is the past tense. Out here with the simple past tense, we use the past tense of the verb. So essentially that would mean that I eat. That means generally I eat, regularly, every day, would become I ate. Okay, and that is how it is. So I wore black shoes, I sat beside the window, things like that. I picked up the glass, but it dropped from my hand. I wore black shoes, things of that sort. Only the past tense of the root of the verb as it is, then the past tense of the verb is used. How about the future? Future, obviously, actions that will happen regularly. The actions that will happen regularly or generally in the future, will plus the root form of the verb. I will go to school in the USA. So things that will happen regularly in the future. So these are all examples of simple tense. What about the continuous tense? The present continuous tense describes an unfinished action that is happening at the moment. Okay, that is the use. Of course, the form is auxiliary verb plus the present participle ing. This auxiliary verb is a special verb. It's also called the helping verb sometimes, right? It is called the helping verb. It shows three things. The auxiliary verb is responsible for showing three things. Number one, time. It shows you the time. It shows you the number. It shows you the number. It shows you the person. And these are the three things that it will show you on the runtime of a sentence. Runtime of a sentence. So if you have a sentence on the runtime, it is going to show you. So let's take an example. As for example, let's take the simple present tense of a sentence. I go to school. Now, the present continuous tense for this will be I am going to school, but for the sake of understanding, let's leave out the am and write it simple as instead of I go to school is the simple present tense. The continuous tense should be, of course, we know that should be I am going to school, but instead of writing am, which is what is the auxiliary verb, right? Out here, am is the auxiliary verb. We are leaving out the auxiliary verb and writing the sentence as I am going to, instead of I am going to school, I am writing it as I going to school. What happens when we transform this into the past tense? So I go to school becomes I went to school. But when it comes to this sentence, we get stuck because the past tense should be I went into school, the past continuous, but then there is no word called venting. We don't have a word called venting. So I'm forced to write it as that I again going to school, right? So how do we demarcate, differentiate between this one which is in the present, this one which is in the past? Here this verb, the auxiliary verb changes, right? So instead of am, it would become I was going to school, which shows the time in this case. If I change I to another person, suppose, or plural, maybe if I change the number, right? If I put it as they, of course they were going to school. So with the time, with the number, and with the person, the auxiliary verb changes. So the present continuous tense, you have to write the auxiliary verb plus the verb plus ing. Example can be I am creating my writing schedule, creating, and am creating, am is the auxiliary verb out here. Past describes an unfinished action that was happening at some point in time in the past. Again, auxiliary verb in the past, as I already mentioned, instead of am, it will become was, plus the verb. I was creating my writing schedule when the doorbell rang. And what about the future? Describes an unfinished action that will be happening at some time in the future, right? Auxiliary verb in the future plus be plus verb plus ing. This is sometimes used for planned activities also. This is sometimes also used for planned activities. I will be creating my writing schedule tomorrow. So this could be a planned activity that you would be creating your writing schedule tomorrow. So it's a very simple discussion on continuous tense. We need to again understand that verbs which are stative don't have a continuous tense. So we did that when we did the verb. You can go back to the verbs and refer that back to understand. The perfect tense used to describe an event that has just been completed. The form is have plus or have plus verb in the past participle. Always, even in the present tense, not necessarily when we talk about the present tense, the actual happening is in the present. This one is in the past, so a past participle is used. Very important, we are using the past participle. Just in case you have missed what is the past participle, you can go back to that chapter on verbs and you will be able to understand what a past participle is. So examples are I have eaten, he has gone. Same thing when we are looking at the past, it is had, the auxiliary verb as we have already discussed would change plus verb in the past participle, and when we are describing the future it will be will have, again the auxiliary verb changes and the verb is always in the past participle. So in the perfect tense, the verb is always in the past participle. As we have already mentioned in verb, the past participle of the verb could generally be formed by making an ed attached or suffixing an ed with the verb. But then there are some irregular verbs wherein the past participle is not equal to the past tense. You can refer back to the verb chapter for that. I had eaten before 10 p.m. yesterday. I had eaten before 10 p.m. yesterday describes an event that had been completed before a certain time in the past and describes an event that will be completed before a certain time in the future. I will have eaten before 10 p.m. tomorrow. Right? So simple. These are the so on the SAT. So how does it look like on the SAT? On the SAT, we will have to understand the meaning of a sentence and try to find out where and how this sentence was spoken, in which tense. We'll take some examples when we do the agreement part. And the last one, which is the present perfect continuous tense, describes an event. For the present one, describes an event that started in the past. An event that started in the past and still continues. It has not ended. Okay, still continues. And the form is have or has, depending on the person, plus been plus verb plus ing. I have been reading since morning. Event started in the past. Event started in the past, that is morning, and still continues because I'm still reading. I've been residing in New York for 2 years. Right? I have been residing in New York for 2 years. So the event started in the past 2 years back and still continues. Now here the noteworthy thing is that when we talk about a point in time, like morning, right? It's a point in time. When we talk about a point in time, the word that we use is since. And when we use something which is a period of time, like 2 years, the word that we use is for, right? So this is how it works. What about the past perfect continuous tense? Event started in the past, continued, and then stopped. I had been reading since morning, but then I'm not reading yet. I had been residing in New York for 2 years. I'm not residing in New York now. And future, the event started in the past, continued, and will continue to a certain period in the future. Will have been. I will have been residing in New York for 2 years by 2120. Okay, so this is how the present perfect continuous tense works. So nutshell takeaway 3 into 4, 12 combinations. We have to be absolutely sure as to what is the exact tense of a sentence. So you can pause this video for a moment and you can have a look at this tense chart, and that should solve our problem as far as the SAT goes. We will take up some live examples when we do our examples. Stay tuned. Next section coming up is prepositional phrases, another very important section when it comes to the SAT.